Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing actor, entrepreneur, author, and your next Michigan State Senator, Hill Harper. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes. Thanks for joining us. So, the running joke is that you are the MVP of the Black Lawyers Podcast.
I'll take it.
Look, 3 seasons in a row. You're the only guest who's done 3 seasons in a row. You've been on talking about your journey with you being at Harvard Law School, then your financial literacy app, and now you're back to talk about your race. And so we're really excited about that. But before we jump into that, of course, I make all my guests do hot topics. So today's hot topic, we have the House Speaker right now. That seat is vacant. They've now nominated, they're up to 3 people. The Republicans have just maybe a few hours ago nominated Tom Emmer from Minnesota. And so some people just don't, some people are like, well, who cares? How does this really affect me? But because you do have a political background with your various degrees and things like that, can you explain that while we don't have a House, how much is not getting done? So like there's literally legislation pending and things like that, like how it ultimately affects like the average listener and why someone should care.
Well, first of all, and fundamentally, we've heard this term representation matters, and representation matters so much, particularly federally, when we talk about Congress. And specifically, you're asking about the House of Representatives. And, my race, I'm running for the United States Senate, which is the other half, of Congress. And unfortunately, what we've seen in this political theater is, again, politicians not putting the people first. Politicians not putting what they're supposed to be doing, which is representing the American citizens, the taxpayer of America's best interest. But of course, no, they don't. And listen, what's happening with the dysfunction in the Republican conference that you're seeing play out in the House of Representatives is just a microcosm of the entire dysfunction of our Congress. Unfortunately, we live in a time where the political parties have put staying in power, and the individual politicians have put staying in power and remaining in office over the interests of their constituents. And this is particularly federally. And what do I mean by that? Take a look at what's going on. There is real business that needs to get done in this moment, right? There are real bills that could be getting passed right now this year. There are real things that that folks could be working on, but instead they're gridlocked because there is no leader of the House to go ahead and move things along, right? And Republicans are in the majority. It's a very slight majority, and they've been unable to agree on a speaker. Now, what's so powerful about that role is many folks may not know that Speaker of the House is third in line to the presidency. Okay. So if it's, this isn't just a performative role, this is a very, very important role. So obviously, if something was happening to the president and something was happening to the vice president, the Speaker of the House would be the president of the United States.
There's a show about that, Designated Survivor. I think that's what happens.
Is that what it was?
Yes, it's on ABC, interesting enough. Something happens, because it's like unheard of, right? That all your leaders would be killed at once. It was like a terrorist attack. And so, like you said, they had to go all the way down the line. It was like, okay, this person would be next in line to be president. So I actually did think about it that way. That third, I didn't realize it would be third. That's pretty high up.
Big deal. It's a big deal. And
wow.
And but beyond that,
right.
The point is that when we think about how dysfunctional Congress has become, this probably isn't the worst element, to be honest. The worst element is the fact that they spend each congressional member on average spends 4 to 6 hours a day, the people's time, raising money, making phone calls, dialing for dollars, actually not doing the work of the people, right? Not meeting with constituents and figuring out what they want, not meeting with other lawmakers and figuring out what they should pass and how to negotiate. They spend the time making phone calls. That's why we need campaign finance reform. We need to pull the money out of politics. We need to get corporate money out of politics. We need to get rid of Citizens United. There's all sorts of things we need to do because that's what they spend their time. The other thing folks would know, unless you've gone to visit many of these congressional offices, is that the vast majority of them have 1, 2, 3 TVs in their offices tuned to, you guessed it, cable news. And so either they're dialing for dollars or they're watching cable news to decide what they should be doing, rather than actually, I think they should disallow dialing for dollars on the people's time or the people's dime. So raise money, but between 9 and 6 p.m., you can't watch TV. It's like my son. You can't watch TV and you can't get on the phone unless it has to do with legislation. That we have to reclaim our democracy. That's why there's so little trust, I believe, by people, and that's why your voter turnout go down and down and down, because people don't believe that they get a return on their investment of a vote. In other words, they don't believe they're getting real representation, particularly federally. And so we have to change that, and that's what my candidacy is all about. It's a people-powered campaign saying, I want to run and represent people, not represent lobbyists, not represent special interests, not represent big corporate money and corporate interest. I want to represent the people from communities in a real way, and not raise money on the people's time or the people's dime, not watch cable news, but actually do the work. And so all of this theater is a part of that. And this is my point. In other words, you can't divorce the fact that all these folks are watching cable news, making these decisions about how can I performatively disrupt things. And so this has become much more of political theater than what it should be, doing the work for people.
And they have the nerve to say, you have the nerve to run as an actor. They are the actors. They're the actors, right?
Beyond that, they're acting up, is what
they're acting up. No, so I guess that goes.
You say they're acting a fool. My grandma used to look at me, she would side eye me and say, "Stop acting a fool."
So I guess it goes without saying then. You're not, I mean, this has never been done, that someone has removed a House Speaker. So you're not shocked that this happened. I mean, this has never happened before, but I guess you're saying this was not a shocking move based on what has led up to
based on where we are right now politically. But everybody watching this podcast is at fault. And this is what I mean. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror. We've allowed this to happen by not showing up and turning out to vote. We've allowed this to happen by being suckered by a bunch of political ads and super PACs and independent expenditure ads that slam candidates and special interest groups that lie about candidates and all these things. We've been co-opted, that our democracy has been literally taken over in a way by the top 1% and moneyed interest and folks who just are interested in power and in the maintenance of their own political power. And that includes the political parties. And people say, ooh, should you be saying that? No, both parties. Both parties are at fault.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm running as a Democrat.
Right.
But let's be very clear, both parties are at fault. And that's why we need new leadership, new type of leadership, and new type of representation, I think, to regain democratic trust and regain people to truly trust in our democracy again.
I agree with that. Well, that segue. Thank you for playing Hot Topics. You always give the best answers. And every time you talk about something, I feel like I learned something new. That's a great segue into your first question. Why did you choose to represent the great state of Michigan?
Yeah, well, over a decade ago, Michigan used to have a really great governmental policy, and that was media tax incentives for media production, for film, television, and other types of media. So it was creating a ton of union jobs. It was bringing a lot of projects here. And I did a couple independent films here back to back, and I met some of the greatest people in the world. And it reminded me of a time, because I'd met a lot of Detroiters when I was at Harvard Law School, because my roommate for 4 years went to the University of Michigan, and he was marrying a woman who was from a legendary Detroit family, Judge Diggs's daughter named Carla Diggs. And so I met a ton of Detroiters, came here for their wedding, and always had an affinity for Detroit and Southeast Michigan. But when I came back here, much more as an adult, to shoot and work, folks were like, man, you should get a house here, you should move here. And it planted a seed. At that time, I didn't have kids. And I said to myself at that time, the people here are so wonderful that when I have kids, I want to raise them here, because I'd like them to turn out like folks from Michigan, more so than the folks in Hollywood. And that to me was important. And, you know, my son was born December 19th, 2015. I adopted him, and I started looking for a place. So I bought a place here in 2016, an old home. It's over 100 years old. Started renovating it, and you know, this has been my home. And you know, even though I've shot, my main job since that time has been shooting the show The Good Doctor. We shoot that show in Vancouver, British Columbia. So you know, making this, it's kind of like an actor's kind of like being an athlete in a way. You have a home base, but you may be working anywhere, so you go where the work is. And so that's how it's been. But Michigan, you know, my story is really a Michigan story. It really, that's why I chose Michigan, because it resonates so much with the people here. You know, hard work, a lot of diversity. You know, Michigan's one of the most diverse states in the country. It's not just racially, but also in terms of topography. I mean, you know, you have a great urban core like Detroit, and then you could be 30, 40 minutes, you're in like the middle of farmland, and then you go somewhere else, and then you have small little towns, and then you go somewhere else, and you're in the middle of the Great Lakes, and you're fishing. And so it represents a lot of the things that I love, which is environment, clean environment, but also, you know, artistry as far as this urban core. I mean, the history of Detroit music, and you know, I've fallen in love with it. Marry that with the fact that years ago I was invited by Ryan Coogler, this is pre-Black Panther, to come to Flint to just do a kind of an outreach goodwill event where I spoke, and Stevie Wonder performed, and Jasmine Sullivan was there, and other folks. And again, met somebody that said, hey man, don't be like these celebs coming through here, take a picture, and we never see you again. So I started coming back there, doing work, organizing around getting people to sign up for the lawsuit. And so I'd already made a lot of friendships in Southeast Michigan and in this area. And so just a natural extension. And so I love living here. You know, this is one of my favorite places in the world, and the people are some of the best. When I say the best people in the world, some of the best people in the world are here.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I didn't know much about Michigan until maybe a couple of years ago. Two of my really close friends who are also lawyers are from Michigan, and one of them is Jade Mathis, who's Judge Mathis's daughter. They're big fans of yours. So yeah, I didn't really know anyone before Jade and my other friend Jessica, who are both from Michigan, and so yeah, I've learned a lot about Michigan recently just through them. Yeah.
Roommate at Harvard
Mhm.
was named Brian Mathis. I wonder if they're related, but
I wonder.
He was from Grand Rapids, or still is.
Hmm. I will ask just because that name typically, if you're from Michigan, you had that name, you're
Probably,
probably related to
yeah,
them. Yeah.
probably. And to be quite honest, what I love about the people is the fact that it's a combination of three things. Because someone really asked me to drill down on this. One, there's like a grit and a hard work ethic
Hmm. Hmm.
that resonates with me. Two, there's like a creativity and a creative spirit, you
Hmm.
know, that history of like Motown and music and all these. I mean, it's a creative place. People are creative with their language, they're creative with their dress and style.
Hmm.
It's just
Hmm.
creative. And three, there's almost like an old kind of Southern grandmama kindness, like a come on in here, baby, have a lemonade kindness, you know. And I've lived in different places that have had maybe two of those three things, but this is the only place that's had three. For instance, like in Brooklyn, there's definitely grit, definitely creativity, but nobody's necessarily inviting you in for a lemonade. But then you go out to California, you have creativity, you have people inviting you in for a lavender lemonade, but if it rains and people fold like a cheap suit, so there's no grit, you know. And so you know, this is a place that has all of it because it's persevered so much, it's been through so much, it's seen the highest of the highs, and I think it's in many ways seen the lowest of the lows. You deal with extreme weather here that you know you got to have some grit to deal with some of this weather. And so I think it builds character. And that's why I wanted to raise my son here. And that's why I chose Michigan. And that's why I need other people listening to me right now to choose Michigan. We need more of y'all to move here, more of y'all to invest here. You know, I bought a coffee shop downtown Detroit about 6 years ago and invested here. You know, I think coffee's community. I'm big into wanting to build community, and you can do that through investment. You can do that through investment of time. You can do that through investment of money. You can do that through investment of energy and investment of your heart. And I'm trying to do all those things here.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question. I mean, obviously, you've been a doctor twice on TV, so you've been, this, and I always laugh because I'm a Harvard lawyer, but I don't think he's ever played a lawyer in TV. I think only played never. No one ever gave you a lawyer role. I think that's funny that you've played doctors on TV, but I don't think you've
Now, I
ever played a
did
lawyer.
play Eric Holder, who was, I played him, he obviously he was the attorney general.
Right.
But at that point, I guess he was a lawyer because he had joined a law firm as of counsel after he was attorney general. So I did play him, but I was playing a very specific person in Eric Holder. So I did that on the Uber show with it was for Showtime or Netflix. I think Showtime.
Oh, one of those. Okay. Yeah, because I thought about it and I was like, I couldn't think. Yeah, I was like, I think mainly his mid characters. I know CSI, I know the Good Doctor. So like, yeah, they haven't made him be a lawyer yet. So okay, cool. So that settles that. So you've been this actor, everyone, you're this beloved actor. So we were just joking about how they're acting up on the floor. Like it's all this political drama. At some level, you are this actor transitioning to being a politician. Why do you think this is the right time, like now to run versus maybe wait 4 years from now? Like, why did you think, were you already maybe thinking a few years ago? Like, why did you think this was the time to run?
It really comes, for me, it comes down to impact and legacy. Right now, where we are in our country politically, we're on the precipice of literally destroying our democracy. So if there was ever a time to weigh in, it would be now. And you marry that with the fact that it's the first time in 30 years Michigan has a open seat Democratic primary. And so it may not happen again in my lifetime. But even beyond that, it's about what is happening in our country. And the fact that my son can say to me as we're driving to school, Daddy, I'm afraid to go to school because there might be a shooter, and realizing that we are making our youngest of the young, he said that when he was in first grade, go through active shooter training and traumatizing these babies because we don't have the political will to stand up to a special interest, billion-dollar special interest gun lobby and the NRA. My job as a parent is to protect the mental health of my child. And we're allowing that to happen just because the NRA says to politicians, you know what, we're going to make sure you don't get reelected. We'll spend so much money against you because they can, given the way our campaign finance laws are structured. We'll spend millions to make sure you don't get reelected. So, you better not be courageous on this issue. You better just talk about red flag laws and maybe don't say you're going to ban weapons of mass murder, and we have to have the political will to do that. You marry that with the fact that when I'm driving home here in Detroit, I come off the I-75 and I go down a street. I take a right on a street called Oakland. I get to a street called Owen. There's a bombed out building to my left. Across the street, there's a vacant lot that's never been rebuilt. There's a bombed out building with a tree going through the middle to my right in faded letters that says Eli's Produce. And across the street, there's a liquor store where a single mom on SNAP money can only get Funyuns, Fago, or Werner through 3 inches of plexi for her family. And you can't find a piece of fresh produce for 3 miles around. And we're acting like that's okay. It's unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable that we have $6.2 trillion in the United States federal spending every year. $6.2 trillion. We have a $30 trillion budget shortfall, deficit that we're saddling with young people because we're not willing to be efficient with our government. We're not willing to actually spread those resources to where they need to go socially. Universal health care, outstanding public education. These are things that are fundamental to, I believe, a functioning, healthy society, yet the money goes all these different places that most of us can't even identify, even though we're American citizens and the federal government should be providing a safety net and opportunity for a better life and better communities. I believe we've gotten so far away from that. So that's why I'm running, to represent the people and the people's interest and make sure that resources get checked and they don't flow all these other places besides the place where they should go. And I believe that's the only way we actually reclaim our democracy. And so that's why this is the moment. We have to do it now, or our democracy will be lost. And we're still, I think, our hardest hit communities will become part of a permanent underclass, which I personally won't allow to sit back and see happen on my watch.
So with that being said, what are your major tenets of your platform? Everyone running usually has whatever 3 to 5 things that they're primarily focused on. If a Michigan voter is listening, or someone that just wants to donate to your campaign, because yes, you can donate to his campaign and not live in Michigan.
Please go to Hill Harper.
Yes. You can donate without living in Michigan.
$1 makes a difference.
Every dollar makes a difference. Yes, but what would you say your main focus? I mean, because like you said, there's so much going on.
Talk about a few pieces of legislation that I would want to pass literally on day one. Number one, one of those would be, and this isn't in order of priority, this is just ones that I want to see worked on immediately. I want to get the John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act passed. The Civil Rights Act of 1965 has been gutted. It hasn't been renewed or re-upped by our legislators. So we're seeing active gerrymandering and literally voting blocks and voting groups be completely annihilated across this country, particularly in very aggressive states that I mean, some of the things we've seen happen across the country. Look at what they've done in Jackson, Mississippi, where they just literally replaced all these judges for political reasons. A city that's significantly predominantly African American now has no African American judges. It just shows you that if we allow people who have negative intentions to just work those negative intentions without some type of equal protection under the law, to really speak to what our founding documents talk about, liberty and justice for all. We need the John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act. It deals with gerrymandering. It deals with voter suppression. It deals with voter intimidation. And so we have to protect the voter, and we have to protect our democracy through that. Another thing I'd love to pass and fight to pass is the PRO Act. And that is it's about undergirding our unions. Right now, my union is on strike. I was very proud that my union elected me to its national board, and I served in that body for 4 years. Being a union leader and being someone who's very, very much pro-union, we're down to 6% union membership in the private sector. If I'm elected to the United States Senate, I'd be the only U.S. senator who is a current union member, which is a shame. And so these are striking things, because if we don't draw a line in the sand now for labor and workers' rights, we're going to see them continue to get I'm dragged down. We need the National Labor Relations Board to have real teeth to be able to mete out real sanctions and penalties to make sure companies aren't doing union suppression, which they've been doing, particularly with burgeoning new technology, et cetera. And so those are two pieces of legislation. Another piece of legislation would be I want to ban weapons of mass murder. I truly believe that assault rifles, high mag rifles, and listen, this is coming from somebody. I went to officer candidate school in the Marine Corps during college, and I learned how to take apart and put together an M16, and I know the power of that weapon. And I don't want to go with what the NRA tries to go with, which is getting us involved in a Second Amendment debate. I went to Harvard Law School. I can debate Second Amendment all day. This isn't a Second Amendment issue. I don't want to take away people's guns. My father used to take me skeet shooting. You keep your guns, keep your pistols, keep your shotguns, keep your rifles. What I want to take off the streets are assault rifles, high mag rifles, weapons that aren't meant to hunt, except hunt people, yeah. and reclassify them as weapons of mass murder, just like we classify, a bomb or a hand grenade, mm-hmm. And so these are the types of things that, that's an example. The other piece is universal health care. The number one cause of personal bankruptcies in this country is healthcare. We've allowed private equity to take over our healthcare. We need to have a healthcare safety net in our country that says if you get sick, you deserve to see a quality doctor, and it has to be that simple. And then the other piece is public education. I live in a city where 79% of the kids are significantly below grade level in reading and writing. If you can't read, you can't learn, particularly in an idea economy. And the fact that we've sat back and allowed our public education system in many of our most marginalized communities to disintegrate. And finally, I know I'm giving you a lot, but finally, as a small business owner, I truly believe in economic development in communities around small businesses and the fact that we're going to create jobs through small business. Small businesses are the engines of our economies, particularly in communities and recirculating the dollar. And so we want to do that. And that leads me to affordable housing. If you don't have jobs, if you don't have paying a living wage, you have to make sure that you're dealing with affordable housing so people have livable wages to afford the housing in their communities. And obviously housing costs are different community to community, but affordable housing is something that we have a homelessness crisis, we have a mental health crisis, we have an opioid epidemic. I mean, there are so many things we can be talking about. Our federal government has to be leaning into these issues to make life better for people. That's its purpose. Its purpose is to provide a safety net and provide opportunity and incentives for people to be more successful. How do we pay for all this is the question a lot of people ask. Right. Through efficiency. Yeah. Our United States government, as I said before, $6.2 trillion budget, extremely inefficient the way it spends. Extremely. We haven't used technology. We haven't used 21st century technology to make it more efficient. We can lean in and use technology. I believe people should be able to decide where their money goes. Right now, they have zero say. And we rubber stamp things in the U.S. government where people would be astounded by how much we spend just on things that are considered legacy spends, meaning rubber stamping things. It's always been this way. That's the way we're going to spend it. We have to stop that mentality. We have to go through these budgets and the way we spend with a fine-tooth comb, and we have to spend the money and be a good fiduciary of people's money and the way we spend it.
What would you say is the key thing that differentiates you between yourself and the other candidates that are running? If there's one thing in your mind, you're like, this is what I definitely bring, I feel like, to the table that a voter would, if they're looking at all the candidates, what stands out?
I bring the ability to be independent and truly represent people. The other candidates in the race are politicians and folks who have served and worked in government. And I don't begrudge their service. Let's be clear. I have a great deal of respect for their service. In fact, I don't begrudge anybody who's actually running for office because it's actually difficult. And I'm very proud that people raise their hand to run. But I come at this with a different spirit and a different mentality. And that's that I want to fight for people. I want to put people over politics. I want people to believe that someone is there representing their best interest, not the best interest of a political party, not the best interest of special interest, not the best interest of a lobbyist, not the best interest of corporate interest or big donors' interest, but the people's interest. And that's the differentiating factor for me. And, I don't care who has a good idea. I'll go with their idea. It doesn't have, if it's something that's not in my party, that's okay. The thing is that I believe that my values are significantly more in line with the Democratic Party and people who represent the Democratic Party and their values than the other party right now. But I'll tell you, in the US Senate, right now it's a 50-50 Senate. If there are 50 members of the other party that have what I consider to be a good idea that represents the interests of the people, then I would have no problem voting, because I don't owe any favors to anybody in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I would be able to the only favor I owe are to people, and to the people who elected me, the people of Michigan. And I want to go and fight for the people of Michigan in the US Senate.
What would you say is the hardest thing so far running for Senate, and maybe the thing you've enjoyed the most so far?
Well, by far the hardest thing is the absolute requirement that people keep telling me I gotta get on the phone and raise money. I gotta be calling big donors, and that's how I need to be spending all my time, or I can't win. And can you just listen to that? Can you believe that? I mean, that's what we're saying in a democracy. They're not talking about ideas. They're not talking about representation. They're not talking about hard work. They're not talking about listening to people. They're talking about money. And that's why hopefully anyone who's listening to this will understand that if you go to hillharper.com and support and spread the word with people within your phone, and even $1 makes a difference. And then if you can recruit 10 other people to give $2 and ask them to recruit 10, and if I can create a movement of that small dollar donor, I can spend more time actually doing the part, and this is the second part of the answer, that's really enjoyable. And that's traveling around to all 83 counties in Michigan, meeting with people in their living rooms, meeting with them at the dining table, meeting them at 7-Eleven and at the gas station, and meeting them at the Union Hall, meeting them at the churches, and listening to their needs, listening to what they're frustrated about, listening to what they want to see happen in their life, and then say, hey, I can help do that. Most people see the federal government as actually a drain from them, rather than what it should be, something that actually makes their lives better. And I believe I can get in there and represent folks to get policies passed, to get money allocated, to get resources to make their lives, improve the quality of their life, not see the federal government as something that's actually making their life worse. And so I've enjoyed, and that's resonating with everybody that I talk to across the state. And so I love meeting with all these Michiganders everywhere. And we realize, unifying the state is the goal. We got to create unity. And you start to realize how similar folks are. That single mom I talked about at the corner of Oakland and Owen, her needs are very similar to that small family farmer in the UP. They both want quality health care that's accessible. They both want safe communities. They both want a quality education for their kids. And they want affordability. They want to be able to pay for their gas, pay for their house, pay for their car without going into lifelong debt. And so if we talk about it from that perspective, that folks I meet start to realize, wow, this guy, no matter the party, can really represent my interests in a real way. And that's what I want to do.
When I think of, and to be honest with you, I can only probably think of two off the top of my head. But when I think of other people that have been maybe Hollywood acting, obviously you have Ronald Reagan, who was an actor before, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those are the only two I can think of like quickly off the top of my head. So you're an actor coming to this space. What would you say is a transferable skill set? And you can name more than one, but if you can only focus on one, what do you think is a skill set?
I don't want to leave some other folks out. There was Fred Thompson from Tennessee who was on Law
Okay.
and Order. He
Oh, okay. All right.
senator, and he eventually ran for president briefly. You have Al Franken from Minnesota, who was a comedian. He was on, I think he was on Saturday Night Live. Jesse the Body Ventura, I think he was a WWE wrestler or something. And so, but obviously Ronald Reagan is the most famous. And in fact, the union that I was elected to the national board of, he was the president of that union at one point, SAG-AFTRA. But I think I'm not sure. Probably the most transferable piece of being an actor that I think serves well in this space is curiosity about people. You know, to be a great actor, you have to be really curious, and you have to be curious about people. Like if you're going to play a character about, you know, somebody who runs a shoe store, you have to be curious about how does that person eat? How do they walk? What do they eat? What, you know, who, you know, where do they live? How do they dress? You know, and you have to really be interested in that, because that becomes part of the character you're going to play. And I think that in public service, in representative service or elected body, you need to truly be curious about what people want to see. At least you hope that's the case. You want to be curious about what people's needs are. You want to be curious about what's going to make their life better, what's going to improve the quality of their life when they sit down at their dinner table with you in office as opposed to somebody else. And you really need to understand that and listen. That's the other piece. And acting, great acting is really great listening. And so I think that what I've learned is listening. I can't stand the politicians that are just ma, 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 ma. Really effective representation is about listening to somebody first. I don't know all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert in everything, but I can listen and I can hear from the experts. And I truly believe the people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I want to hear from people. I want to understand what they have to say. And so those two things, I've never been asked that question before. So I'm really glad you asked it, because I would say
this is why this is the Black Lawyers Podcast. My mom is always like, she's always like, are you gonna ask this person this and that? I said, I'm not gonna really ask them stuff I can kind of Google. You know, I try to ask questions that are not Googleable, because I never know what people's answers.
Curiosity and listening. Boom. Those are the two.
Yeah. So someone's like, well, you're an actor. Why are you trying? Like, I have transferable skill sets. And if you're listening, in addition to him being a Harvard lawyer, you also got your master's at Harvard, right?
From the
Was
Kennedy
it?
School of Government. It was a master's in government. They call it a master's in public administration.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially a master's in government. So, you know, I joke with my classmate from Harvard Law School, Barack Obama, that I'm the one with the master's in government. Come on, man. Couldn't be more proud of him.
Yes.
And couldn't be more proud of Michelle Obama, who also graduated from Harvard Law School.
Yes. Yes.
And just fantastic leader and fantastic leadership.
Yes, definitely. So yes,
appearance by Spice. Spice just walked up. Hold on.
Spice. Who's Spice? Because before Pierce made a appearance. Oh, look at, if you're watching this, you can see his dog. Such a beautiful dog. Such a beautiful dog. Such a beautiful dog. Okay, so last question. Fill in these two sentences. Okay. The first one is, a Michigan voter should vote for me because.
A Michigan voter should vote for me because I will represent you. Not lobbyists, not special interests, not corporate interests. You.
Great. And then I want my legacy to be.
I want my legacy to be someone who positively changed the lives of folks who don't feel that they have voice or agency or power in the political process.
Oh, like I said, you didn't go to Harvard for no reason. You know how to answer all the questions so well. So we end each episode with a Black Excellence Moment of the Week, because as you know, there's so much sad news that we try to put some positive news on this podcast. And always try to look for news that's related to my guest. So you'll like this one. Twin sisters Gianna and Tiana Tao Husant. They're both 17 years old from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. They both got into Harvard. And they want to be surgeons. Both of them want to be surgeons. They got into Harvard. Harvard, which I'm sure Hill, only I think for 2027, they had a 3.4 acceptance rate out of 56,937 applicants. So for both sisters, I think one thought they would get in and the other one wouldn't. I guess now when you get you used to get hard copy letters. Now you pull it up on your computer. So they both had their computers up and it's like, mine says, what does yours say? What does mine say? So we just want to congratulate Gianna and Tiana for getting in their path to obviously being medical doctors, just like becoming a lawyer. It's a long road, but they both got into Harvard. So we want to congratulate them. These are not stories that you'll hear other places. So we want to give a major shout out to them. You have a Harvard lawyer running for Michigan senator.
And my roommate at Harvard who's from Michigan, was at Harvard Medical School, and he lives here in Detroit, and he has his practice here. And he was my roommate at when I was at Harvard Law School and the Kennedy School. He was at the medical school, so we couldn't be more proud of you. Both my parents were doctors too, so medicine runs in my family, so we love it. So,
absolutely, absolutely. And look, and you play a doctor too.
Exactly.
Right. And you play a doctor TV. You are just a man of many talents. Yes. I also just want to mention the other reason why we call Hill the MVP of the podcast is because in addition to coming on several times, he's also worn the Black TV Doctor shirt. He's the only person that's played a doctor twice. So we didn't put both of his names. We put Dr. Andrews, but his name is on the shirt. A percentage of that collection in the Black TV Lawyers collection that Kerry Washington also wears the shirt for. Those collections go to our Obama Law Scholarship and our Harrison Smith scholarship. So we appreciate you guys buying the shirts, supporting the collection. We just ended one session for applications for the fall, but we open back up during Black History Month. So if you are a Black medical student or Black law student listening and you want a scholarship to help towards, your board exams, your bar exam, your fees, it's very expensive to become a lawyer. It's very expensive to become a doctor. We're happy that the podcast helps. And Hill, thank you again so much for, again, supporting that as well. We're rooting for you. And as always, we're rooting for everyone Black. Take care, everyone.